An American airstrike has targeted Jihadi John, the British Islamic State militiaman shown beheading Western hostages in the extremist group's propaganda videos. Announcing the attack, the Pentagon said it was still assessing whether the Kuwaiti-born British militant, whose real name is Mohammed Emwazi, has actually been killed. That announcement came hours after Islamic State claimed responsibility for a bombing in Beirut that killed 41 and injured hundreds more, most of them civilians living in a Hezbollah-controlled area of the Lebanese capital. Well, for the latest on these developments, I'm joined by our Middle East correspondent, Matt Brown. Matt, there was a worldwide hunt sparked by these propaganda videos for Jihadi John. Where does the US say they finally caught up with him?
Tim, they say they believe they caught up with him as he was in a vehicle that was believed to be carrying him around Raqqa, which is the de facto Islamic State capital in Syria. They also have been telling journalists that he was tracked very carefully over time. So that's giving some indication that this was a sort of a long-running intelligence operation, as you say, a worldwide hunt on for him. But I suppose bolstering the idea that they may well have got him, these statements that they've been looking at him over time, presumably tracking his movements, which must be why they have some kind of confidence to be talking about it, the idea that he would have been in this vehicle that they've hit.
But the atrocities shown in those propaganda videos caused particular outrage around the world. Can you run through what crimes Jihadi John was considered responsible for?
Well, look, this man has been an extraordinary propagandist for the Islamic State group, and he's been involved in a litany of absolutely ghastly executions. He first appeared in a video in August last year for the execution of James Foley. And not long after that, it was Stephen Sotloff. Then some people who are perhaps less well known, aid worker David Haynes, UK taxi driver Alan Henning, a US aid worker called Abdul Rahman Kasib, and a Japanese journalist, Kenji Goto. So all of those people murdered in cold blood by the Islamic State group, and Mohammed Emwazi, Jihadi John, involved each time propagandising about those acts.
Matt, the announcement about this airstrike came just a few hours after Islamic State perpetrated another atrocity in the streets of Beirut. The claim by Islamic State that it was responsible for these 3 suicide bombers, is that considered authentic?
It's considered credible because of the sectarian and political breakdown in Beirut, which involves the Shiite militia Hezbollah here, which controls the part of Beirut that was bombed. They've been fighting in Syria alongside the forces of the government of Bashar al-Assad. Who are they fighting? They're fighting the mostly Sunni rebels, and the most extreme amongst them are, of course, the al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra and the Islamic State group. So, yes, it's a very credible claim. It's very credible that that's exactly who would want to be targeting a Hezbollah stronghold here in Beirut. Claims like that have been made after previous bomb attacks here in Beirut on the Hezbollah stronghold in the south of the city. The question is, was it directed and funded from IS HQ in Raqqa? Unlikely, but there are enough fellow travellers and operational links for it to be a credible claim of an IS operation of some sort.
IS bombings in Lebanon against Hezbollah targets had been suspended for some time. Do you think this indicates that the reversals it's suffered in Syria in recent times, particularly in the north of the country, losing key airports, roads and towns to a combination of the Russians and Hezbollah and Syrian army forces, that they're hurting and it's retaliating?
Yeah, it's hard to read into the tea leaves of how this happened. First of all, start from the ground up. When we went in there last night to the scene of the bombing, you have to go through a lot of Hezbollah security and a lot of informal security. Anytime you go in there, you've probably been in there in previous years and noticed that, immediately Hezbollah operatives pick up the fact that you're there, report on it, and start asking you about who you are and where you're from. And often you can be escorted around or even tracked without you quite realising it until you leave. But yeah, on that bigger front, yes, Islamic State has suffered significant setbacks when the more moderate rebel groups banded together and fought them back out of territory they controlled, but also in part with these Russian airstrikes, sometimes, not usually, but sometimes targeting them and inflicting serious losses on them. Not mostly, because most of those Russian airstrikes have targeted extreme groups, but they have suffered losses as a result of these more moderate rebels attacking them, and also the Russians and Syrian government forces.
Matt Brown, thanks very much for joining us. Middle East correspondent Matt Brown speaking live there from the Lebanese capital, Beirut.